Number 10, the philosopher torn apart by her own city. March 415 AD, Alexandria, Egypt. The greatest port in the ancient Mediterranean world. A chariot rolls through streets baked white by the afternoon sun, and inside it sits a woman in her early 60s wearing the plain robe of a teacher, her gray hair bound back. Her name is Hypatia. She is the daughter of Theon, the last known member of the Museum of Alexandria, and by every ancient account, she is the most respected intellectual alive in the eastern half of the Roman Empire. She teaches Neoplatonic philosophy, astronomy, and mathematics. She has written commentaries on Diophantus and Apollonius. She has corresponded with the imperial prefect Orestes, the highest civil authority in Egypt, and pagans and Christians alike sit in her lecture hall to hear her explain the geometry of conic sections. She has done nothing wrong. She is simply about to die because two men who cannot fight each other openly have found someone in the middle they can both destroy. The two men are Orestes, the Roman prefect, and Cyril, the newly elected bishop of Alexandria. Their feud has poisoned the city for months. Cyril has been expanding the political power of the church into every corner of Alexandrian life. Orestes has been trying to hold him back. Hypatia, respected by both, keeps refusing to intervene. That refusal is enough. Cyril's propagandists whisper through the streets that the philosopher is a sorceress, that she has bewitched Orestes with mathematics and astrology, that she is the reason the prefect will not submit to the bishop. Somebody in the crowd decides that removing the witch will end the standoff. On the day it happens, the chariot is ambushed by a mob of Christian street activists, monks, and lay enforcers loosely attached to the church, led by a lector named Peter. They drag her from the vehicle in her own street. They strip her of her clothes in public. They haul her into the newly Christianized Caesareum church, and inside that church on consecrated ground, they beat her with ostraca. The word means broken pottery, oyster shells, roof tiles, whatever fragments of hardened clay the mob can pick up off the harbor road. They flay her skin from her body with the shards. They dismember what is left. They drag the pieces to a place called Cineron and burn them. And here's where it becomes the assassination that backfires. Cyril wanted Orestes broken. Instead, the murder of Hypatia stains him forever. The imperial court in Constantinople investigates. Church funding to Alexandria's private militia gets cut. Cyril's political ambitions are permanently checked. The prefect Orestes gets promoted out of the situation alive. But the deeper backfire runs across centuries. Hypatia becomes the symbol that Christian mob violence chose, one specific afternoon, to destroy the last public philosopher of the classical world. And that image never fades. Every Enlightenment thinker who wanted to argue that Christianity had murdered antiquity would reach for her name. Every 19th century deist, every 20th century secularist, every modern novelist looking for the exact instant when the ancient world of open inquiry ended, they all point to that chariot in the Alexandria street. Cyril was later made a saint. Hypatia was made an argument against sainthood itself. The bishop won the afternoon. The philosopher won the next 1,600 years. Number 9, the lovers who killed the wrong brother. It is 514 BC in Athens, the Panathenaic Festival. Every citizen of the polis walks in a great armed procession up to the Acropolis to honor the goddess Athena. And because the procession is armed, this is the one day of the year on which a man carrying a concealed dagger under his cloak arouses no suspicion. 2. Lovers have been waiting for this day for months. Harmodius is a beautiful young aristocrat, the Eromenos, the beloved. Aristogotine is his older partner. They belong to the same clan. And they have been pushed to the edge of endurance by the ruling family of Athens. Since the death of the tyrant Pisistratus, his two sons, Hippias and Hipparchus, have ruled the city between them. Hippias holds the real power. Hipparchus mostly sponsors poets, patronizes art, and, according to Thucydides, has spent months trying to seduce Harmodius. Harmodius has refused. Hipparchus has retaliated in the pettiest way imaginable. He has publicly humiliated Harmodius's young sister, inviting her to be a Canephoros, a maiden basket bearer in the very Panathenaic procession, and then rejecting her at the last moment on the grounds that she is not worthy of the honor. In archaic Greek terms, this is a spectacular insult to the family. Aristogiton and Harmodius decide that the tyranny will end today. They will kill both Hippias and Hipparchus in the procession. A small group of accomplices are with them. The plan miscarries almost immediately. Standing in the crowd, they see one of their fellow conspirators walk over to Hippias and speak to him in a friendly tone. They panic. They convince themselves the plot has been betrayed and the guards are about to seize them. Rather than wait to be arrested, they charge Hipparchus, who is nearer, and stab him to death on the spot. Hippias, the actual tyrant, is unhurt on the other side of the procession. Harmodius is cut down instantly by the tyrant's bodyguards. Aristogiton is captured, tortured horrifically, for information, and executed. And here is the backfire. Before 514 BC, Hippias had been what ancient Greeks would call a moderate tyrant. He ran Athens with a light hand, patronizing the arts through his brother keeping taxes low and largely leaving citizens alone. After 514 BC, watching his brother die in front of him has transformed him. For the next 4 years, he becomes genuinely paranoid, genuinely tyrannical in the modern sense. Executions, exiles, surveillance, confiscations. Athens experiences something under Hippias between 514 and 510 BC that it had never experienced before, and by the time the Spartan king Cleomenes I finally invades and forces Hippias into exile, the very concept of tyranny has been so poisoned in the Athenian imagination that within a few years the reforms of Cleisthenes create the world's first recognizable democracy. Hipparchus's murder made Athens worse in the short term, better in the long, and Harmodius and Aristogiton, the two lovers who had murdered the wrong brother out of a private grievance dressed up as a political principle, get remade. Bronze statues of them by Antenor go up in the agora. Drinking songs celebrate them as liberators. Their descendants get free meals in the town hall for generations. When Xerxes sacks Athens in 480 BC and carts the original statues back to Persia, the Athenians commission new ones by Critias and Nesiotes, and those become the model for the entire visual language of Greek tyrannicide for the next 1,000 years. Two men who failed at the assassination they attempted became the founding heroes of the state they had failed to liberate. The city they did not free chose to believe they had freed it because it needed the story to be true. Number 8. The reformer killed in his bed. Athens again, 461 BC, half a century after the tyrannicides. But before we go any further, a warning: if the name Ephialtes rings a bell from another script, it is not the same man. The Ephialtes remembered as the traitor of Thermopylae, the goatherd who sold the pass to the Persians in 480 BC, is a completely different person. The Ephialtes we are talking about now is the greatest democratic reformer Athens ever produced, and his story is the greatest unsolved political murder in the ancient world. Ephialtes, son of Sophonides, has spent 20 years watching Athens harden into a two-tier system. The democracy created by Cleisthenes decades earlier still exists, on paper, but real power has drifted into the hands of the Areopagus, the ancient aristocratic council that meets on the Hill of Ares, just below the Acropolis. Only former archons sit on the Areopagus, and archons are chosen almost exclusively from the wealthy noble families. Once you are on the Areopagus, you are on it for life. And the Areopagus controls the audit of all public officials, the prosecution of state trials, and the informal guardianship of the entire constitution. In practice, this means the nobles can veto anything the popular assembly does. Ephialtes has decided this must end. In 462 or early 461 BC, while his main conservative opponent, Cimon, is off in the Peloponnese leading a hoplite expedition to help Sparta suppress a Helot revolt, Ephialtes strikes. He and his young protege, a rising politician named Pericles, take a bill to the popular assembly. In a single vote, they strip the Areopagus of every political and judicial power it possesses. Homicide and a residual religious jurisdiction is all it will keep. Everything else, The trials, the audits, the guardianship of the laws is transferred to the popular courts and the assembly itself. This is the birth of what ancient sources call radical democracy. It is the greatest single expansion of citizen political power in the ancient world. And it is the last thing the aristocratic families of Athens will ever tolerate from Ephialtes. Within weeks, sources indicate months, of the reform passing, Ephialtes is dead, he is murdered in his sleep, in his own house, in the middle of the night. The killer is never caught. The killer is never even identified. The historian Antiphon, writing 40 years later in a real Athenian court case, mentions the murder of Ephialtes specifically as an example of an assassination whose perpetrator was never discovered. Aristotle later names a suspect. One, Aristodicus of Tanagra, but Aristotle is writing more than a century after the fact, and no ancient source can agree on whether Aristodicus acted alone, for the oligarchs, or for another faction entirely. Some modern scholars have even quietly speculated that Pericles himself might have known more about the killing than he ever admitted. The oligarchs who arranged it, whoever they were, believed they had killed the reforms. They had not. The backfire is immediate and total. Simon returns from Sparta days later, gets ostracized almost on arrival, and vanishes into exile. Pericles inherits the entire democratic movement without a rival. Within 10 years, the reforms of Ephialtes have become the constitutional bedrock of the Athenian Golden Age. The Parthenon rises on the Acropolis, the empire expands. Sophocles, writes Antigone. Herodotus completes the histories. The Athenian democracy that will inspire every Republican thinker from Cicero to Jefferson runs on the machinery Ephialtes built and paid for with his life. His enemies wanted the old order back. They gave him instead the perfect martyrdom. The murder of Ephialtes did not kill democracy. It froze democracy into a permanent shape by removing the one man whose next reform might have gone too far to survive. Sometimes the assassin builds the monument. Number 7, the emperor murdered by his own bodyguard. Persepolis, autumn 465 BC. The palace of Xerxes I, king of kings, ruler of the Achaemenid Empire, from Egypt to the Indus. He has come home to this palace complex nearly 15 years earlier from his catastrophic invasion of Greece, the Persian expedition that ended in the naval disaster at Salamis, and the destruction of his army at Plataea. He has never really recovered. The proud conqueror of Athens who watched the Acropolis burn from his throne on the shores of the Hellespont has become, by all Greek accounts, and most Babylonian tablet evidence, a paranoid recluse spending most of his time inside the palace walls, surrounded by concubines, eunuchs, and the endless intrigues of the Persian court. The most powerful man in that court, apart from Xerxes himself, is Artabanus. Not the earlier famous Artabanus, uncle of the king who advised against the Greek invasion. This is a different Artabanus, sometimes called Artabanus of Persia, a Hyrcanian by birth, who has risen to command the royal bodyguard. He controls physical access to the sovereign. He decides who sees the king and who does not. And, working with a chamberlain eunuch named Aspameters, he has decided that Xerxes must die. What follows, according to sources ranging from Ctesias to Diodorus Siculus to Aristotle, is one of the most tangled palace conspiracies in the ancient world. There are two competing versions of the sequence, but both agree on the outcome. In the first, Artabanus enters the royal bedchamber at night with Aspameters and murders Xerxes in his bed. He then goes to the youngest son, Artaxerxes, and tells him that the murderer was his older brother, the crown prince Darius. In the second version, Artabanus kills the crown prince Darius first, then realizes Xerxes will avenge his heir and kills the king to save himself. Either way, Aristotle records the second version. The young Artaxerxes believes Artabanus. He orders his own brother Darius arrested and dragged to the palace and executed for a killing Darius did not commit. In the space of one court intrigue, the Achaemenid dynasty loses a great king and a crown prince within days of each other. Artabanus runs Persia for 7 months. Egypt even briefly recognizes him as ruler. He has, by any short-term measure, succeeded. The backfire is that his fellow conspirator, the general Megabyzus, betrays him to Artaxerxes. Artabanus is killed by sword. Aspameters the eunuch, according to CTSs, is executed by being placed in a wooden trough and left to be eaten alive by insects. The Achaemenid throne survives, but with a hollowed dynasty. Artaxerxes I will now rule for 40 years, but he will never quite trust anyone again, and the succession chaos of 465 sets the precedent for every subsequent Persian civil war. When Alexander the Great arrives on the Persian frontier 130 years later, the empire he shatters so easily is a state that has never entirely recovered from the night Xerxes died in his bed. Kill the king, keep the crown, for 7 months, lose your family, lose your dynasty, lose your civilization. That is the Persian arithmetic of 465 BC. Number 6. The last of the Greeks poisoned in a cellar. Autumn 183 BC. The town of Messene, southern Peloponnese, a dark stone chamber below ground level. A 70-year-old man sits with his back against the wall. His legs are chained. His face is bruised. His breath comes shallow because he has been sick for weeks with a fever nothing can cure. His name is Philopoemen. A Roman writer will call him Hoeshados ton Helenon, the last of the Greeks. He has been strategos, elected general, of the Achaean League 8 separate times. He has broken the tyrants of Sparta with his cavalry. He has propelled the Achaean League into the dominant military power of the Peloponnese. Historians of the next generation, Polybius among them, will say that with him, the free Greek states end because there was no one left after him who could stand up to Rome. And he is going to die in the next few minutes because he made one tactical mistake. Messene has revolted against the Achaean League under a local warlord named Dinocrates, who has always hated Philopoemen. Philopoemen has ridden south with his cavalry to crush the rebellion, feverish, exhausted, still holding on to the certainty that no Greek city can beat him. On the ridges above Messene, Dinocrates ambushes him. In the confusion, Philopoemen's horse throws him. He hits the ground hard. He does not get up. The Messenians take him prisoner and drag him to the town, terrified of what they have done. They shove him into an underground chamber and lock the trap door. Nobody sleeps in Messene that night. Killing Philopoemen outright is not an option. He is too famous, but keeping him alive is worse. Dinocrates sends in a public official carrying a cup of hemlock. He tells the old man that this is the more honorable death. Philopoemen has already understood. He asks the guard one question: "Are my cavalrymen safe?" He is told that most of them escaped. "Good," he says, and drinks. Here is what Dinocrates thought would happen. With Philopoemen dead, Messene would slip out of the league, the Peloponnese would fragment again, and the Romans, still fighting in Macedon and Asia, would leave the Greeks to sort themselves out. Here is what actually happens. The moment the news reaches the Achaean cities, the League mobilizes with a fury it has not shown in a generation. The historian Polybius, at that time a 20-something aristocrat of Megalopolis, is chosen to carry the funeral urn containing Philopoemen's ashes in the procession, and every city on the route sends citizens into the road to weep and to pledge revenge. The League army takes Messene by storm. Dinocrates disappears, probably killing himself before capture. Every man involved in the poisoning is executed, some tortured slowly first. But that is only the domestic backfire. The wider backfire is worse. Rome has been watching. In the eyes of the Roman Senate, the murder of Philopoemen has demonstrated that Greek politics is now too chaotic to leave alone. Over the next 2 decades, the Roman news tightens. In 168 BC, the last Macedonian king, Perseus, is defeated at Pydna. In 146 BC, Rome burns Corinth to the ground and dissolves the Achaean League. Polybius, the same historian who once carried Philopoemen's ashes, is by then a hostage in Rome watching his homeland lose its independence. Dinocrates poisoned the last of the Greeks and got the end of Greek independence delivered by Roman legions inside 40 years. Kill the man who held the ship together, and the ship sinks faster than you can swim. Number 5, the Dagger in the Map, 227 BC. Xianyang, capital of the state of Qin, Western China. a vast reception hall of polished, lacquered wood columns rising 30 feet above the throne dais, and on that throne sits Ying Zhang, the king of Qin the man history will remember as Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor. He is not the first emperor yet. He is 33 years old, ambitious, ruthless, and 6 years into a systematic campaign of conquest that is going to unify all of China under his boot. He has already destroyed the state of Han. He is preparing to destroy the state of Yan next. Yan is small, terrified, and has just sent 2 emissaries to the Qin court with what look like extravagant gifts of surrender. Emissary 1 is a young hothead named Qin Wuyang, chosen for the mission because he supposedly killed his first man at the age of 13. Emissary 2 is a wandering swordsman scholar named Jing Ke, who has spent the last year drinking and singing with the doomed Crown Prince Dan of Yan, the man who commissioned this suicide mission. Between them, the emissaries carry 2 objects: a sealed lacquer box containing the severed head of the Qin traitor general Fan Yuqiu, who cut his own throat so his head could be used as bait, and a silk scroll containing a map of the rich territory of Dukang, which Yan is offering to surrender to Qin in exchange for peace. Hidden inside that scroll, folded so tightly it cannot be seen even from a step away, is a dagger. The blade has been dipped in poison so lethal that a single scratch kills within moments. The plan is that Jing Ke will unroll the map before the throne reveal the dagger, seize the king of Qin by the sleeve, and either capture him alive as a hostage or kill him on the spot. The audience begins. Qin Wuyang, the murderer at 13, freezes at the sight of the throne room and cannot walk forward. The Qin courtiers stare. Jing courtiers smiles and explains that his companion is a country boy overwhelmed by the majesty of the Son of Heaven. He continues alone. He mounts the dais, he unrolls the map, the dagger flashes, Jing Ke grabs the king's sleeve, the king rears back. Ying Zheng is a tall man. His ceremonial sword hangs at his hip in an ornamental scabbard so long it will not clear even when he tries to draw it. He runs. Jing Ke pursues him around a jade pillar. No court official is allowed to carry a weapon into the throne room. The armed guards stand outside. From the crowd of terrified officials, the court physician Xiao Wuju throws his medicine bag at the assassin. The bag hits Jing Ke and slows him for an instant. In that instant, somebody shouts to the king that he can push the scabbard around behind his back and draw the sword over his shoulder. He does it. Now armed, he turns and strikes. He cuts open Jing Ke's thigh. Jing Ke, unable to walk, hurls the dagger. It misses. It embeds itself in the pillar. The guards pour into the hall. Jing Ke is hacked to pieces where he sits, laughing at the king, according to Sima Qian, because he knows his death is nothing compared to what is coming next. Prince Dan sent the assassin to save the state of Yan. Instead, he provoked the exact opposite. Ying Zhang, until then still moving methodically through his war plans, now orders every available legion to march on Yan immediately. Prince Dan is captured by his own father, the king of Yan, who sends the prince's head to Qin as a peace offering. It changes nothing. Within 5 years, Yan is annexed. Within 6 years, all 7 warring states are under one crown, and Ying Zheng crowns himself Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of a unified China that will continue in one form or another for the next 2,200 years. Jing Ke's failed assassination is the single most consequential political killing that never happened. The state that sent the assassin was destroyed by the target he did not kill, and the target himself became the founder of a civilization. Jing Ke's song at the Yi River as he set out haunts Chinese poetry to this day. The wind howls, the waters of the Yi run cold when a hero sets out, he never returns. The hero never returned, neither did anything else that stood in Qin Shi Huang's way. Number 4, the strangled emperor in the auction of Rome. Back now to that bathhouse we opened with, December 31st, 192 AD. But this time we tell the story in full. Commodus is the son of Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor, and by the end of his reign, he is nothing his father was. He has renamed the months of the year after his own titles. He has refounded Rome as Colonia Commodiana, the city of Commodus. He has fought in the Colosseum himself as a gladiator, taking on wounded soldiers and crippled slaves, so his victories will be certain. He has decided to enter the year 193 in the costume of a gladiator rather than the toga of a consul, dressing to parade from the Colosseum barracks itself on New Year's morning. And he has drawn up a list of people to be killed to start the new year off cleanly. The names on that list include his mistress Marcia, his chamberlain Eclectus, and the Praetorian prefect Quintus Aemilius Laetus. Marcia finds the list. It is in a wax tablet the emperor has left carelessly on a couch. She reads her own name. She goes straight to the other two. They agree there will not be a January the 1st for them if there is one for the emperor. Marcia takes the wine cup to Commodus that evening after his bath poison mixed carefully into the drink. He drinks. And here the assassination almost fails in the most farcical possible way. Commodus has spent 12 years drinking himself half to death nightly, and his stomach revolts. He vomits. Most of the poison comes back up. He is groggy, sick, but conscious and angry. In the panic, the conspirators summon Narcissus, the emperor's private wrestling coach, and pay him a fortune to finish it. Narcissus enters the bathhouse. Commodus is on the floor of the caldarium, dazed. Narcissus, one of the strongest men in Rome, kneels on him and chokes him to death with his bare hands. Cassius Dio says it happened in the bath. Herodian says, the bed? Either way, the emperor of Rome dies in his own house, murdered by the wrestling partner he trusted with his own naked body every week. This should be the story of a tyrant deservedly removed and a wise successor restoring the empire. It is not. This is where the backfire opens like an abyss. The conspirators install a respected old senator, Pertinax, as the new emperor. Pertinax lasts 87 days before the Praetorian Guard, furious that he has refused to pay them the traditional donation, storms his palace on March the 28th, 193 AD, and cuts his head off. Then the Praetorians do something no one in Roman history has ever done before. They put the throne of the Roman Empire up for open auction from the walls of their fortified camp. 2 senators bid. The bidding rises. Titus Flavius Sulpicianus, the father-in-law of the murdered Pertinax, offers 5,000 drachmas per soldier. Marcus Didius Julianus, standing on the other side of the wall, bids 6,250. Julianus wins. He is proclaimed emperor by the Praetorians and reluctantly confirmed by a terrified Senate. He rules for 66 days. In those 66 days, 3 provincial generals declare themselves emperor. Septimius Severus in the Danube, Hescinius Niger in Syria, Clodius Albinus in Britain. Severus marches on Rome. Julianus is executed by his own Praetorians on June the 2nd, hoping the murder will please the new master. It does not. Severus disbands the Praetorian Guard, kills the ones who murdered Pertinax, and then spends the next 4 years fighting civil wars to eliminate his rivals. The killing of Commodus, a decision made in an afternoon panic by 3 people trying to save their own lives, triggered the Year of the 5 Emperors, ended the Antonine dynasty, ushered in the militarized Severan dynasty, and set the pattern for the 3rd century crisis that nearly destroyed Rome altogether. A wrestler broke the neck of the emperor. History broke the neck of the empire. Number 3. The man burned inside the Senate House. January the 18th, 52 BC. The Appian Way, 12 miles south of Rome, near a small town called Boville. Late afternoon. On the road, walking north back toward the city with a bodyguard of 30 armed men, is Publius Clodius Pulcher, aristocratic-born renegade populist, author of the Free Grain Dole, enemy of Cicero, ally of Julius Caesar, at least officially, runner of the biggest street gang in Rome, a coalition of collegia freedmen and paid enforcers who have been fighting a running battle with the rival gangs of the ex-consul Titus Annius Milo for years. On the road, walking south, is Milo himself, with an even larger bodyguard, including 2 professional gladiators named Eudemus and Beria. They meet at Boville. The confrontation begins as a shouted insult from the back of one column to the tail of the other. Somebody throws a spear. Within seconds, it becomes a running knife fight in the road ditch. Clodius is wounded in the shoulder by one of Milo's gladiators and flees into a roadside inn. Milo sends his men in after him. They drag Clodius out of the inn into the road and stab him to death in front of the innkeeper. Milo has just done what he has wanted to do for 5 years. He has removed the man who has terrorized his political career. He is a consular candidate. His faction, the Optimates, will now dominate the year 52. So he believes on the ride back to Rome. Here's what actually happens. Word reaches Rome that night. Clodius's followers, led by his widow, Fulvia, put his mangled body on public display in the Forum the next morning. Fulvia, in one of the most theatrical political performances of the ancient world, stands over the corpse and shows every wound to the massed plebs of Rome. The crowd goes mad. They pick up the body, still in its bloody toga, and carry it to the Curia Hostilia, the ancient Senate house that has stood in the Forum since the earliest days of the Republic. Inside, they pile up the wooden benches and the writing desks and the ivory seats of the senators. They set fire to the whole thing, using the Senate house itself as Clodius's funeral pyre. The building burns to the ground. Milo's calculation had been simple. Kill Clodius, become consul, protect the Republic from mob politics. The result is the exact opposite. Rome is now in such chaos that the Senate cannot function. Multiple attempts to hold elections collapse into gang fighting. Finally, on the recommendation of the very man Milo hoped to serve, Pompey the Great is voted sole consul without a colleague. Sole consul. This has never been legal before. It is a constitutional fabrication designed to give one man total emergency authority to restore order. Pompey uses it to enact new anti-violence laws and under those exact laws to prosecute Milo. Cicero, Milo's oldest ally, is so intimidated by the armed troops that Pompey has stationed around the trial that he cannot deliver his speech. He stammers, stumbles, gives up. Milo is convicted and exiled to Marseille. The published version of Cicero's speech, the Pro Malone, is the greatest defense speech he never actually gave. Milo, on hearing it read aloud in exile, quips that if Cicero had given it in the trial, he would not now be eating red mullet. But the deeper backfire is the making of Pompey. In one killing, Milo has handed Pompey the sole consulship. Pompey uses it as the platform for the constitutional confrontation with Julius Caesar 3 years later that becomes the Great Civil War. Everything, Pharsalus, the death of Pompey in Egypt, the assassination of Caesar in 44 BC, everything after 52 BC, runs downhill from the moment Milo's gladiators dragged Clodius out of that inn. Milo killed one politician and burned down the Roman Republic in the process. The Senate house itself became his real gravestone. Number 2, the orator butchered in his litter. December the 7th, 43 BC, the road between Formiae and the coast. A slave litter carried by 4 exhausted bearers moves through olive groves under a hazy winter sun. Inside the litter sits an old man, 63 years old, unshaven, pale, exhausted. He has been running for weeks. He has just given up. His name is Marcus Tullius Cicero, and he is the greatest orator the Latin language has ever produced. His entire political career is behind him. He served as consul in 63 BC, the year he crushed the Capitoline conspiracy. He has been the intellectual conscience of the Roman Senate for 3 decades. And he has spent the last 12 months of his life delivering the Philippics, a series of 14 furious speeches attacking Mark Antony as the man who would murder the Republic. Antony has never forgiven him. When the Second Triumvirate is formed a few weeks earlier in October, 43 BC, Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus draw up the proscription lists together. Antony insists on Cicero's name. Octavian, whose political career Cicero had personally launched, resists for 2 days and then trades him for one of Antony's own uncles. Cicero has known this is coming. He tried to flee to Greece by ship. Bad weather drove him back. He tried to make it to another villa. Slaves failed to catch a wind. He has come home to his villa at Formiae to hide, and now, hearing the assassins are close, he has ordered his slaves to carry him on the litter down to the coast. His household staff, who love him, want to fight. They arm themselves. Some of them lie to searching soldiers about where their master is gone. In the end, it is his own freedman, Philologus, who is said to have betrayed the route to the killers. The centurion in charge of the killing party is a man named Herennius. The tribune with him is Popilius Linnaeus, whom Cicero once successfully defended in court on a charge of murdering his own father. Popilius has come personally to make sure the job is done. The litter is spotted moving through the trees. The bearers stop. The killers approach. Cicero, according to the historian Livy, does not try to run. He orders the litter set down. He pushes his head out through the curtains. He straightens his neck. He tells the executioner to do it cleanly. Herennius strikes. The head does not come off in one blow. It takes several. Antony has specifically ordered that the hands as well as the head be brought back to Rome, because it was the hands that wrote the Philippics. The killers hack off both hands. The head and hands are wrapped and carried back to the city like game meat. At Antony's house, Fulvia, that same Fulvia who once carried the body of Clodius into the Curia Hostilia 9 years earlier, and who has since married Mark Antony, stands over the head of the man who ruined her first political world with his oratory. She spits on it. She yanks out the tongue. She stabs it repeatedly with the hairpins from her own hair. This is the last silencing of Cicero the woman can achieve. Then Antony orders the head and the hands nailed to the rostra in the Forum, the very platform from which Cicero delivered his greatest speeches, including the Philippics. Romans coming to hear the news of the prescriptions read out see the tongue-torn head above them. Here is where the assassin's arithmetic breaks completely. Antony has calculated that by making the punishment public and grotesque, he is warning every remaining senator against opposing the triumvirate. In the short term, he is right. Nobody says anything. In the long term, the calculation is a catastrophe. The image of the severed hands nailed above the rostra becomes the moral wound of the age. Cicero's writings, his political letters, his philosophical works, his speeches, all become required reading for every Roman schoolboy for the next 400 years. Every time a young Roman quotes Cicero and they never stop quoting him, they are quoting a man Antony murdered. Cicero's ideas about mixed government, about natural law, about civic virtue, and the responsibility of the citizen jump over the fall of Rome entirely and land in the hands of Petrarch, of Erasmus, of John Adams, of Thomas Jefferson. Antony killed the last spokesman for the Republic and made him the founding voice of every Republican movement in Western history. Fulvia stabbed the tongue with her hairpin. The tongue never stopped talking. Every serious defense of political liberty written between 43 BC and the American Revolution runs partly through Marcus Tullius Cicero, and every one of them at some level exists because Antony refused to let him live to see the age of Augustus. The proscription lists disappeared. The severed hands rotted. The head decomposed above the rostra. The words survived them all. Number 1, the day the Roman Republic died on the Capitoline Hill. June 133 BC. Rome. A summer noon so hot that the air above the Capitoline stones is shimmering. On the top of the hill, in front of the Temple of Fides, thousands of Roman citizens have gathered around a low platform where their tribune, the man they have elected to protect their interests against the aristocratic Senate, is trying to speak. He is 29 years old. His name is Tiberius Sempronius Gracchus. He is a grandson of Scipio Africanus. He has fought at Carthage in the Third Punic War. He has served with distinction in Spain. And he has spent the last 12 months trying to give Roman public land to Roman soldiers whose families were driven off it while they were away at the front. The senatorial nobles who own most of that land illegally, who have grazed their private herds on it for generations, do not want to give it back. Tiberius has forced his land bill through the assembly anyway. He has deposed a fellow tribune to do it, an unprecedented move. He has funded the reform out of the newly bequeathed treasure of Pergamum, cutting the Senate out of the finance vote. And, most terrifyingly to his enemies, he is standing for re-election as tribune, which is not exactly illegal, but has not been done in living memory. Rumors are spreading through the noble houses that morning. that Tiberius wants a crown, that he is a demagogue in the mold of the old Greek tyrants, that if he is not stopped today, the Republic will die tomorrow. Inside the Senate, an emergency session is being held in the Temple of Fides itself, 50 meters from the crowd. The debate is furious. The presiding consul refuses to declare Tiberius an enemy of the state. In the middle of the debate, Publius Cornelius Scipio Nasica, Serapio the Pontifex Maximus of Rome, the highest priest, stands up. According to Plutarch, he pulls the hem of his toga over his head in the ancient priestly gesture, the gesture used when consecrating a sacrifice. He calls on every senator who loves the Republic to follow him. Then he walks out of the temple. Several hundred senators, their clients, their armed retainers, and their sons walk out with him. They stream up the hill toward the crowd. The rioters have almost no weapons. They are ordinary voters, tradesmen, farmers, freedmen, come to hear Tiberius speak. The senators do not have swords either. Weapons in the sacred pomerium of the city are forbidden. But the senators are still sitting on curule chairs, the ivory folding stools of Roman magistrates, and there are wooden benches all around the assembly area. They break up the benches. They break the legs off the chairs. They walk into the crowd swinging table legs and chair legs like clubs. What follows is the first political massacre in the city of Rome in more than 300 years. Since the founding of the Republic in 509 BC, the sacrosanct person of a tribune of the plebs has been protected by ancient oath. To lay hands on a tribune has been unthinkable. On this afternoon, it is thought and done. The senators reach Tiberius on the platform. They surround him. They beat him to death with chair legs on the sacred Capitoline in front of the Temple of Fides, the temple of the good faith of Rome. When he is dead, they keep going. They club to death more than 300 of his supporters where they stand. And that night, in a decision that will be remembered as the final desecration, the senators haul the bodies of Tiberius Gracchus and his followers to the Tiber and dump them into the river like refuse, denying them even the funerary rites that Rome grants to the humblest citizen. In the eyes of every senator who walked back down the hill that evening, they had saved the Republic. They believed they had killed a would-be tyrant before he could crown himself. They believed the shock of blood on the Capitoline would freeze all future would-be reformers into silence. They believed the message was clear. Overreach in Rome, and this is what happens to you. Now watch how completely, how catastrophically, how permanently they were wrong. Every single mechanism they used against Tiberius Gracchus that afternoon becomes a template. 10 years later, Tiberius's younger brother, Gaius Gracchus, stands for the same tribunate, passes even more radical reforms, and is hunted to death by senatorial mobs in 125 billion C. 3,000 of his followers are killed in the aftermath. 30 years later, the general Marius uses the mass anger of the landless veterans, the very people the Gracchi tried to help to build the first properly professional Roman army loyal to himself instead of the Senate. 40 years later, Marius's rival Sulla marches that new kind of army on Rome itself and becomes the first Roman general in history to seize the city by force, executing thousands of political enemies in the first Great Proscription. 60 years later, Julius Caesar crosses the Rubicon at the head of his personal legions and destroys the Republic outright. 80 years later, Cicero, whose story you just heard, is nailed to the rostro with his tongue stabbed by hairpins, and 90 years later, Caesar Augustus, having personally organized those proscriptions, is proclaimed the first emperor of Rome. The reformed Tiberius Gracchus proposed redistributing public land to landless soldiers would have been the mildest possible correction to Rome's growing inequality. The refusal to allow that mild correction, and above all the decision to answer it with murder, opened the door on 100 years of civil war that killed the Roman Republic and gave the ancient world every Caesar who followed. Scipio Nasica died in exile within 3 years, formally sent to Pergamum by a senate embarrassed by what he had done. The 300 senators who had walked up the hill with him all died in their beds. But the Republic they thought they were saving died with them. Generation by generation, election by election, coup by coup, for a century. And the last man alive in the Roman street to remember what a functioning republic looked like was already an old man on the day the first emperor was crowned. The senators killed a tribune to preserve the Senate. They lost the Senate, they lost the republic. They lost the very idea of self-government in the Mediterranean world for almost 2,000 years. In the entire ancient catalog of political assassinations that backfired there is nothing that comes close. One dead reformer on the Capitoline, and every empire, every emperor, every dictator between Augustus and Napoleon is downstream of that afternoon. The chair legs killed the republic. So that is our full countdown. 10 assassinations, from Hypatia's oyster shells to Tiberius Gracchus's chair legs. 10 political killers who believed they were saving a system, ending a threat, protecting a principle, or serving a private grievance. 10 killings in which the killer's calculation was destroyed by the consequence. Cyril lost his standing. Hipparchus's brother lost his moderate rule. The oligarchs of Athens lost the aristocratic constitution they were defending. Artabanus lost his life to the son of the man he framed. Dinocrates lost his city to the League. Prince Dan of Yan lost his kingdom to the man he tried to kill. The 3 conspirators against Commodus lost their empire to civil war. Milo lost his career to the sole consul his killing made possible. Antony carved the words he could not silence into the founding library of Western political thought. And 300 Roman senators, standing on the Capitoline, with the blood of a tribune on their broken chair legs, lost the republic they thought they were rescuing. If ancient history teaches anything, it is that killing one person to solve a political problem does not solve the problem. It makes the problem legendary. It carves the victim into the wall of history in letters bigger than the killer could ever hope to match. If you enjoyed walking through those 10 stories with us, do one thing right now. Hit the like button. It tells the YouTube algorithm to send this video to other people who love ancient history the way you do. Hit subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss another countdown. Drop a comment and tell us which assassination surprised you the most and which one you would have ranked higher or lower. Tell us where in the world you are watching from too. Our community stretches across every continent, and it is genuinely one of the best things about this channel. And if you cannot get enough of failed plots, palace intrigue, and knives in the shadows, the next video is already up. In the reign of Nero, a small circle of Roman senators, poets, and praetorian officers conspired to murder the emperor and restore the republic. They came so close, and when it fell apart, Nero unleashed a purge so savage it took down Seneca, Lucan, and Petronius in the space of a few weeks. That is our next full-length breakdown of the Pisonian conspiracy. Click it now. We will see you there.